Hey, welcome to Golden Black Live, the only show on the internet, as far as I know, in the galaxy dedicated solely to Purdue athletics. Appreciate you all tuning in. First off, we always want to thank our sponsors, Basham Rentals, Hilton Garden Inn, Triple X, and State Farm agent Trent Johnson. Today we have a special show, and to my right is the great Kelly Kitchel, an offensive tackle for Purdue University. Kelly toiled here in West Lafayette from 1998 to 2002, comes from a very athletic family, played in a lot of big football games while he was here in West Lafayette, is now still a resident here raising his family. Kelly, it's great to have you here, buddy.
Hey, appreciate you having me on. I always enjoy coming on here.
You know, I'm at spring practice. Every day they've got practice, obviously, and Kelly's out there almost every day as well, watching the team. And I wanted to talk to Kelly today about his observations and thoughts on what he's seen so far in spring football. Obviously, it's a big year for Jeff Brom coming into year three. We all know the offensive line is a key area to watch. And Kelly, again, given your background on the offensive line, I'd love to know and get your input and your thoughts on what you've seen so far from the guys up front.
Well, I'll tell you, I see a lot of work being put in, which is good, and they're a work in progress right now. It's definitely not a finished product. They're definitely not, Big Ten completely ready right now. And it's a good thing the season doesn't start tomorrow because I think we got weapons all around, but the offensive line still got a lot of work to do. And I think what we see now will be different from what we see in the fall. Maybe not too many different personnel, but I think you'll see a different group of linemen, and as they continue to gel, as they continue to mesh. Anytime you have to bring a new or a new center in, that changes things. They're making the calls. You gotta kind of get into a groove a little bit. And sometimes when you're playing next to a guy for a few years, which you kind of get a sixth sense to work with those guys. I remember when I was playing, I played next to Kelly Butler and some of those other guys, and we sometimes we would know what the other one was going to do, and wouldn't have to communicate. These guys are having to communicate all the time because they haven't played next to each other yet. So this has been a big spring for them. I like a lot of our young talent. I like the old guys too, but I think the young talent is going to be. I think our future is bright with those guys. They're very athletic. They move their feet well. Their bodies are big. They can grow into them. So I'm excited about that group. It's even all the way down. We got a kid named Spencer Holstig that just came in this year. He should be a high school senior. And man, he doesn't look like a high school senior. He didn't even go to prom as a senior. He came to Purdue instead, and he's an impressive looking athlete. And I'm excited about those young guys because they all move their feet. They all got big bodies. They're going to get strong. We got a great string staff over there, and they're going to get them in the right direction.
Yeah, you're right. Spencer Holsteg is one of 4 early enrollees for Purdue. Of course, George Karloftis, West Lafayette product, defensive ends on campus. Jalen Graham, a safety from Detroit, awfully impressive as well. I tell you what, Kelly, these incoming freshmen arrived early. They do look very impressive, and in particular, we talked about the line a little bit. While the interior has questions, new center, new guard, the tackles are veterans, and Grant Hermans and Matt McCann. And again, Jeff Brom has been very disappointed with the fact Victor Beach, the sophomore, has missed almost all of spring ball with a bad back, and he really wants to get him integrated as soon as he can because how important that offensive line spot is, the center spot in particular. Yeah. Again, talk about maybe what the center means, that whole offensive line.
Well, it's the linchpin of the whole offense. It's all about communication and making sure guys are going. You get the right hats on the right hats. And a lot of times anymore, the quarterback's making some calls, and you see the quarterback come out and point out the Mike linebacker, do some things. But the center's super important. For one, he's got to get the snap back there. I mean, that's the A1, number one importance. That's got to get back to the quarterback in a timely fashion, so he's not bending over or jumping over his head. He's got to get it back in a good spot, and then make sure he's got everybody going in the right direction. So, yeah, the center is huge, and Victor Beach, we were hoping he would come in the spring and kind of jump right in where Kirk Barron left off, and it just didn't, his body just didn't allow him to do that yet. He's been out there rehabbing. I think he's going to be okay. It doesn't seem like it's anything too serious, but they just want to make sure that they get him right and can get him playing in the fall. And that's, spring is spring. Teams always look different from the spring to the fall. Fall camp is if he's not able to go in fall camp, then we need to be pretty concerned because we're not sure where to go. But right now, I think it's okay. Love for him to be getting the reps and be healthy, but he's not. So a bunch of other guys are getting reps, which as long as the more reps you get, the better, and the more young guys, the better. And what I like, what they've been doing over the last few years, they've been trying to create depth on the offensive line. They're trying to get guys in and get them some reps and get them some time in games and just see what meshes and melds out together because you got to create depth in that up front.
They got about 15 or 16 linemen typically they can work with, so the numbers have definitely gotten better for Dale Williams, the offensive line coach. And Kelly, in addition to being a Purdue alum, also is the sideline reporter for Boilermaker football games. And Kelly, you've seen this Jeff Brom program continue to mature and develop. You've seen the games from 2017 through last year, the first 2 seasons. Now you see spring ball. Talk a little bit about maybe what's impressed you about the evolution of the program and maybe how you've seen the roster change. People I always talk to say, man, I tell you what, the difference in the bodies from when they first got here to now is just remarkable.
Oh, the bodies are different. He's recruiting bigger guys, taller guys that can range and frame and put more weight on that are fast. And there's nothing wrong with it. You just want good football players. Sometimes the body doesn't matter. But, man, when you see some of those, you talk about Jalen Graham, that guy, I'm 6'7", and he looks me right in the eye. I mean, he is a big, physical, good-looking dude that is just a freshman. I mean, just unreal how physical he is coming in as
Looks
that
like a
young.
linebacker
Oh, my
almost.
goodness. He is an impressive young man to see, and all those guys. You talk about George, you talk about Spencer, and I mean the people he's bringing in. Even Corey Trice is he was a little thinner last year. He got in the weight room, and now he's a physical specimen. So it's yes, he's trying to create some bigger bodies, especially when you play in the Big Ten. You're playing in the West. You're playing against the Wisconsins, the Iowas, who all have great big bodies. They're run teams, and you got to be able to stop those guys. You got to be able to move them up front, and that's what he's trying to get as they go. But what I think the number one thing Jeff Brom has done over the years that he's been here is he's trying to teach these guys how to win. He wants them to compete and practice. This has been about as physical of a spring as I've seen. There's live going on. It's physical. They're going. They're hooting and hollering. They're getting after it. I love it. And he's trying to teach these guys to compete and to win because that it's something that can be taught. You can teach kids to win for sure. It's something that as long as if you can keep them competing and keep them going, they'll figure out ways to win each time, and that's what it's all comes down to. We want guys that will come out here, do the right thing, compete to win, put on a good performance for the fans, and do the right thing on and off the field.
Yeah, Jeff Brom said at practice earlier this week that this is definitely the most tackling they've ever had during spring football since he's been here in his brief tenure. That was because there's so many new guys.
Right.
And as you know, Kelly, the only way you can really tell if your defense is dialed in particular is if you're going flat out live and making the tackle. So it's been very physical this year.
Yeah.
I asked Coach Brom, too, the front seven on defense in particular, a lot of players are out. Mm-hmm. Lorenzo Neal, Marcus Bailey, Cornell Jones, on and on it goes. There's a lot of key personnel. He's not too worried about the veterans who are missing time. It's about the young guys who are missing time. But I don't know if anybody on that defense has caught you right. You talked about Corey Trice, obviously, and Jalen Graham. Again, I don't know if anybody else on that defense has really caught you right during spring drills so far, and if so, who are some of those other people?
Yeah, they have. One of the guys that kind of caught me, I was just watching him do one-on-one drills, and a guy named Willie Lane. He was a freshman last year. I think he redshirted, and he's coming in, and he's been injured the last week or so, I believe.
Yeah, he has.
But when I was watching him, his motor is high. He gets after it. He has fun playing football. He seems to embrace contact and embrace the physicality of the sport. He's a little undersized, but, man, I like the way he plays, and I think he can be a good football player for us this year or in the future. He's a guy that I haven't really heard too many people talk about a lot, but I kept asking who's 52 out there. I didn't have a roster on me. I was like, man, who's 52? He's getting after it. I like him, and so he did. I think he's done a nice job up front, and it's that there's going to be those guys that catch you in spring. I mean, there's always spring practice warriors who do really well, but you want to make sure that carries over into the fall. And you talk about all these guys being out. Again, spring's not a big deal. When it gets to fall, that's when you start worrying if guys are out. We want to get them healthy and get them ready to go by August.
Now, tomorrow, 10 a.m., there's going to be a scrimmage. I'm not sure the location still, Kelly. I haven't really been told if it's going to be Ross-Ade Stadium or the Mollenkoff Center. But bottom line, again, 10 a.m. tomorrow. I believe it's open to the public. There'll be a Purdue football scrimmage. We'll get a real good look. I guess live bullets will be flying, as they say. And Jeff Brom, I know, is eager to see how his team reacts. Two of the areas I'll be watching is, one, we talked about the offensive line. Number two, defensive line, Kelly Kitchel. You mentioned Willie Lane in particular. Purdue has to generate a better pass rush. They don't want to have to rely on blitzes to get to quarterbacks this year. In my mind, I'll be dialed in there. I don't know if there's anything you're going to be watching in particular beyond that pass rush in the offensive line tomorrow.
Well, I think that is the number one thing. I mean, they've been recruiting for that. They brought in George Karlaftis, who that's his deal. He's a big, strong, physical kid that all throughout his high school and the workouts he went through, and all the all-star games, everything, he's been pretty much unblockable. And I think that they expect him to come in. They start him with the ones. He had a couple days where he's dinged up, but they started with the ones. They think he can come in and play right away. His body's changed. He's leaned up. Man, he looks good. Mm-hmm. And he's going to be they want him to be a guy that can put pressure on the quarterback and be an every down type of player and really get in there. And then you talk about once that happens, if you got an edge guy, you got Lorenzo Neal who big wide, can put create some things up the middle, and you're hoping that some other guys will come along and you can get some thing going. But if you can have that edge guy who can get in the backfield, I mean, we've seen it with Roosevelt Colvin. I'll just go back to when I played. We had Roosevelt Colvin, Chike O'Keefer, Chucky Wakori, Sean Phillips. Those guys. That was not fun practicing every day against. So that was a baptism by fire on that deal. But that was. Those are difference makers. I mean, those are game changers. And if George can come in and be that type of player, you see it at every level of football. A defensive end who can put pressure on the quarterback can change the game, and they're hoping he can do something like that. But you're right. You want to be able to put pressure on the quarterback, make him get the ball out of his hands earlier than he wants to, and not have to blitz to do it.
Yeah, Kelly coaches at West Lafayette High School, so he saw George Karlaftis develop up close and personal. And Kelly, at a practice, I think it was this week or maybe the week before, some other West Lafayette assistant coaches were there talking to George. And we talked to the assistant coaches, and George says he's actually lost about 10 pounds, but he's really leaned up. Like you said, he looks very good. And, Kelly, we can't have a conversation about Purdue football 2019 without talking at least about these two guys, Elijah Sindelar and Rondale Moore. To me, they both look like they're in mid-season form.
And you're talking about the physicality. Every time Rondale takes a hit, you're like, oh man, let's lay off that guy a little bit and make sure we don't get a cheap one on him, because he is dynamic. I mean, and watching him in the spring, he looks even more dynamic than he did in the fall. And he's just, you see him get around the edge, and we've got fast guys on defense, and they can't catch. With an angle, they're not catching him. And, when he's got the ball in his hands, he is just incredible. And it looks like Sindelar's dialed in, too.
Yes.
And he's putting the ball in the money. And deep balls, he's putting the ball in the money. He's standing in the pocket strong. He's got such a strong arm. We all know that. And we know he can fire it in there. But the touch on the deep balls is what I've been impressed with the most from Sindelar starting out. But you talk about midseason, those two guys look like they're ready to rock and roll.
You got to protect Elijah Sindelar this year. That's why developing that line is so critical, as Kelly and I talked about off the top of this segment here. So Sindelar's looking good. And just imagine this, Kelly, when they drop in David Bell, Milton Wright, Mershawn Rice, T.J. Sheffield, these incoming wide receivers, mix them in with Bryson Hopkins, again, Rondale Moore and company. There's going to be a lot of weapons for Elijah to throw to. And, Kelly, I'd love to know what you think of this. David Blau obviously is gone. The last 2 years, it seemed like Blau and Sindelar sort of fed off each other. Competition's not going to be what it was. Nobody's really nipping at Sindelar's heels. This is his team. How do you think that will impact him psychologically?
Well, I think we saw last year how it impacted David Blau. When he became the guy, he flourished. I thought he really came out. I love competition. I think it's great. But when it was David Blau's team, he really took a big step forward, I thought, last year. So I think the hope would be, now that this is Sinlar's team, he's been through the competitions. Every year he's had to compete. This is his team now, and he can really take that step forward and lead these guys and be the man going forward. You know, you've got some serviceable guys behind him, I think. With Jack Plummer, I think he can be a serviceable guy. Right now he's still young, still a little thin. I love his upside. But, I mean, it's definitely Elijah Sinlar's job, and he is the leader of that group. One guy you didn't mention who I think has been looking as dynamic as anybody on the offense is Tario Fuller as well. He's a guy that started a few years ago, got injured. You know, he was our number one running back for a while, and then he got injured, missed a lot of time. He's come back. He looks really good. He's a strong, powerful running back. He's got top-end speed. He's got it all. And, I mean, when you added Tario Fuller, who I think can have a somewhat of an all Big Ten type of year if we can get that offensive line going. You got Bryson Hopkins, who's an NFL guy.
Yeah, he is.
And then you got Rondell Moore, the most dynamic player in all of college football. Young guys coming in. This offense is going to be potent. And you're right. We got to get the O-line. And Dale Williams will get them going. I mean, you can meld and mold and mix. You know, they don't have to be the most talented guys, but if you get them believing in each other and trusting each other and just doing their job, I think it's going to be a lot of fun this fall.
Yeah, Tario Fuller started the first 3 games of 2017, had a 100-yard rushing game mixed in there, and Kelly talked about him getting hurt an ankle. Was really off the radar last year with another injury, but you're right, Kelly. He looks fantastic physically. And speaking of looking fantastic, one guy who's got a better physique than me and Kelly, without a doubt, is Xander Horvath, number 40. Yeah. The big 6'3", 230-pound fullback from Mishawaka. Tell you what, talk about.
He looks good.
Kelly and I have seen this guy just trucking people, running people over. I know Xander's one of those guys who's a spring star.
Yeah.
Was a spring star last year, was a spring star this year. But, Kelly, I think he may have a role this year in the fall.
Well, I think so, too. He was a spring star last year for sure. You had running backs that weren't playing in the spring. And it was one of those where you knew he's going to look – you have guys that get a ton of reps and they look good, but you're pretty sure they're not going to get many touches in the fall. You see that a lot. So last year he had a nice role. He came in as our fullback, goal line situations. They gave the ball to him a few times. But I almost kind of liken him, if you want to switch sports, to Grady Eifert a little bit. I think he had a role last year. I think he's maybe the hardest worker on this team. At least he looks like, 'cause he's running guys over all the time, and he never seems to take a break in practice. And then, you know, by the time he gets another year under him, I think the coaches trust him more and more and more. I think he has the coaches' trust to maybe he'll get some touches this year. And boy, that's a 1-2 punch now. You put Xander Horvath back there. You put Tario Fuller, who can break any run at any time, and then they can, you know, you got Horvath can block. You can give it to him, and he's earned the trust of the coaches. To me, is what it looks like, and I think he will have a bigger role in the fall as far as carrying the football and being a bigger part of this offense.
Yeah, Evan Anderson and Alfred Armour are 2 other backs working this spring. In June, 2 freshmen will arrive. Well, I think may have a chance to make an impact. So we'll see again. We'll be out of practice today at 4. Again, scrimmage tomorrow, 10 a.m. And then, if you can believe it, next week is the last week for spring football. They'll go Monday, Wednesday. Spring game will be April 6th. So we'll see. And Kelly, I appreciate you coming by and joining me. Kelly will come back and join me for the 3rd segment. We'll take a break now, and then we'll welcome in the great, the one and only John Norberg to talk about a book he has coming out on Purdue University 150-year anniversary. So stay tuned.
Purdue student, there's no reason to move off campus. Basham Rentals, trusted by students like you for 3 generations, leases many units on the edge of campus. Living on campus is fun, convenient, and doesn't have to be more expensive than off-campus